Well, let's bring you more with a conversation on mental health. We have a guest joining us
in the studio already. Jeffrey, you want to do the honors?
I was actually, yes, our guest is already here. But before we introduce our guest, I was looking at, I have to go check out, where's Yelwa? You know, you guys are just saying Yelwa. Where's Yelwa?
I figured it out already.
Yeah, I had to figure it out, like, it's in Kebbi State. For those of you who don't know where Yelwa is, in Kebbi State. So, hey, just in case you're in Yelwa, Yelwa is popular this morning.
So it's a lesson in geography.
So let's just tell you that whatever they said was the weather condition is the weather condition. That's just what I'll say. All right, let's take the conversation a little bit further this morning. We did tell you that, you know, we're going to talk about your health, essentially your mental health. And we have the doctor joining us, consultant psychiatrist, managerial psychologist, and the CEO of ReadyMed Consulting Services, Dr. Bojumbola Abere. Thank you so much for coming on the program, Doctor.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for coming. You have a lot of questions to answer, especially with the netizens. So I want to begin with that. Let's begin with the deconstruction of that word, mental health. So let's lay some basic foundation. What exactly is mental health?
All right. Thank you very much for the question. And, you know, I want to throw it back at you guys. So if I ask this morning, do you have mental health? Show by raise of hands. Do you have mental health?
That's why you're the expert.
Show by raise of hands.
All of those qualifications.
A good part of our job is that we do the asking.
Well, perhaps I would be curious to, you know, ask again, if the question has been properly asked, are you mentally healthy?
Good. Which is, you know, a very easy way to explain it and understand it as well. So usually when people hear the word mental health, of course, the first thing is, mental, yaba left, arrow.
Right.
And so even though there's health at the end of it, people are more likely to refrain and not say I'm mentally healthy or not. But, you know, the way you've asked it is quite interesting and different as well. But basically what mental health is it's the health of the mind. But beyond being the health of the mind is how the mind is successfully able to perform the functions of thinking, of cognition, feeling, emotion, and behavior. And we usually say that, you know, for an individual to say that I am mentally healthy, it means that I'm able to do 4 things. 1, I'm able to cope with the normal stresses of life. 2, I'm able to cope with adversity when adversity shows up. 3, I'm able to have thriving relationships with myself and other people. And last but not the least, in whatever community or environment that I find myself in, I'm able to contribute my quota and remain productive. And so when an individual is able to successfully perform the functions of their minds and they're able to do all of those 4 things, that individual is adjudged as being mentally healthy or being in a state of mental health.
Well, I just want to ask you, because you have the figures as well, you're scientists, so you deal with a lot of figures. I think what jolted a lot of Nigerians to reality was the stats that was given by the CMD of Neuropsychiatric Hospital. They're smiling already in Yaba that there's been a spike in admission cases, and a lot of people woke up to the fact that, wait a minute, this is a very urgent issue. But from the data you've seen, and I know this might cause some uproar, just how prevalent are mental health issues in Nigeria? I don't want to say who in Nigeria is not okay and who is okay, because I know there is that misconstruing of mental health issues. But what does the data tell us about how prevalent it is in Nigeria?
All right, so I like that you said in science is data doesn't lie. Even if we lie, even if we don't want to look at what the reality is, mental health issues are more common than we would give credence to, than we're even, you know, willing to admit. And so when, you know, the CMD of the Federal Neuropsychiatric Hospital came up with those figures, I mean, I had my residency training at the Yaba Psychiatric Hospital, and even way back as 2017, we would have mornings where we have at least 30 new patients every day. What? You know, the numbers may drop during the weekends because, you know, people are resting, but the numbers are high. WHO has said that 1 in 4. But, you know, if you then come down and you look at our peculiarities in a country like Nigeria, I mean, look at the world, then, you know, come down to Nigeria, and we'll joke and say that the Shege Pro Max, the Shege Banza that people are going through, the financial instability, the political insecurity, the Sapa, the Japa, there's so many. I mean, this morning you guys were still talking about the fuel prices. And so there's so much going on, you know, around us, within us, biologically, either disease conditions, genetic, downloads into our bodies. We have things going on in our minds, trauma that we've been exposed to. We have things going on in the environment. And so at the end of the day, what you find is that, an interplay of all of this put people at risk of a significant risk of coming down with a mental health problem. So yes, quite common.
And you know what? That's what the chief medical director of Yaba Psychiatric Hospital attributed it to, the prevailing economic situation and other socioeconomic causes. So that brings me to the next question. How do Nigerians protect themselves? I mean, we started with the possibility of 1,200 naira fuel price per litre, which Nigerians are already talking about. So how do we guard that mind space?
All right. I think it's interesting that you're asking how do we guard it. I think one of the first things we should do is be aware and stop living in denial. One of the biggest things that we do as Nigerians, it's one of our defense mechanisms, is you go to the doctor and they say, oh, your BP is high. You say, I reject it. It's not my portion. But it's the reality. So why are you fighting reality? Accept that mental health problems can happen. I think, many times when people look at mental health issues, they're looking at the disheveled man or woman on the streets, not wearing clothes. But the truth is, we all go through issues at different points in our lives. I want a promotion at work, but it didn't come through. I can become depressed because of that. I lost a loved one. I will suffer grief. I want something to go a certain way, it's not going that way. I'm going through domestic violence. These are pockets of things that happen to, different people at different times. So it's important that people are aware. People don't fight reality. Be aware that it is, it can happen. It is common. It can happen to anyone. I always say that, that anyone who has a brain can come down with a mental health condition, regardless of age, gender, socioeconomic status, race, or even religion. So let's be aware. The second thing, of course, is being informed. So beyond, I know that it can happen. What is it? What does depression look like? What does, postpartum depression look like? What does anxiety look like? Such that people are not, attributing a symptom. Interestingly, I was having a conversation with my daughter yesterday and she said, Mom, have you ever had sleep paralysis? And I said, oh, yes. Sleep paralysis is a condition where your mind is awake, but your body is not awake. And quite a number of people have had this condition and attributed it to, quote unquote, a spiritual attack. So let's be aware, but beyond that, let's guard our minds. How can we guard our minds? We can guard our minds by choosing healthy coping mechanisms. So talking about it. So find a trusted individual, a friend, a colleague, a professional. And so again, we need to stop making it look like, oh, whenever someone is going to the therapist, it means that they're kolo. No. Talk about it. See someone to talk about. People have a lot of, traumatic life events that have happened to them over the years, and a lot of the things that we're seeing, a lot of the ways that they're acting now is because they haven't resolved many of those things. So find healthy coping mechanisms. Find someone to talk to. Find some exercise to engage in. Find, if it's listening to music, whatever it is that serves you, and avoid, unhealthy coping mechanisms such as being aggressive verbally, physically, orally. Avoid drinking excessively. So some people, when they're going through their, demons, they drink a lot of alcohol or they turn to substances of abuse. Some may even start to hurt themselves. They cut themselves. And some may even, want to self-harm or push themselves at risk for suicide. So again, turn to healthy coping mechanisms, regardless of whatever it is that you're going through.
I wanted to find out, because one of the things we try to achieve on the show is when people listen to our expert, they should be able to make decisions for themselves. At what point should you be concerned about your mental health? What are you going to see, or what should you look out for to say, okay, I think I need to see a doctor?
Okay, so what are the signs to look out for? And the signs to look out for, I would say again, usually people will think that it is only when something significant happens that I should do something. Even in day-to-day, ongoings, the heat has been quite intense lately. You'd find that some people find that when they're under a lot of heat, they become unduly irritable, they're cranky, they're shouting. While these things can happen every once in a while, we always say that when your symptoms start to increase in intensity, frequency, and start to cause distress, not just to you, but people around you, then you should start being worried.
Can you say that again?
So when symptoms, so poor sleep, poor appetite, becoming unduly irritable, wanting to keep to self, isolating, withdrawing, eating excessively, drinking excessively, becoming physically aggressive. When some of those symptoms, that's not all, but when you start to identify certain symptoms that are not there or not usual for you, and they start to increase in intensity, frequency, and start to cause distress, not just to you as an individual, but to the people around you, perhaps it's time to see the doctor.
You know, you touched on suicide earlier on, and a lot of the times when we hear stories about someone having committed suicide, you know, they were functional the last time we saw them. They were in fact happy and excited around people. So my question is, what other signs could we have seen to help us intervene, perhaps reach out to such persons to prevent the ultimate damage? Okay,
so the first thing I would do is, help us correct that language, that it's not commit suicide. Usually when we use that term, it means it's a crime. I mean, attempted suicide in Nigeria, in Lagos, is punishable by, it's a crime. And so when people die by suicide, it appears that they've had a facade on their faces all along. And so there's something that we call smiling depression, masked depression, functional depression. This is not my real face. Suffering and smiling. A lot of people are just going through the motions, just showing up, just trying to, make the next day, make the next dollar.
That sounds very African.
Yeah, sounds very African. Let's just do it. We're the happiest people in the world. And so people are struggling with different things, but people don't talk about it because the environment does not allow you, or the environment is not enabling. And even when you talk to people about your problems, I'm like, guy, I want to shake it while I go through it. People are like, my dear, if my own shake is
more than
exactly. So people are also comparing struggles. And to be honest, each individual may not even have the requisite resource to even deal with their own issues, and now you're bringing your own issues. And so what can we do? Let's first of all be there for ourselves. Self-care is extremely important. Self-care is not selfish, and it's not until we hit rock bottom. I mean, the example we always say is, you don't wait till your phone is red and you start running all around. When your phone is like 10%, you're like, let me charge it. But we wait till our bodies and our minds are in minus degrees before we start acting. So let's learn to take care of ourselves first. We cannot serve from an empty vessel. You can't give what you don't have. It's what you have, what you're equipped with, what you've learnt about, that you may be able to pick the signs and symptoms in someone else. If you can, then you first of all, I always say that do what I will call the 4 L's. 1, learn about mental health and illness. Learn about it. Be hungry for the knowledge. Be able to identify it when you see it. The second is that you look out for yourself. What are the signs? What's going on with me? Why is my mood like this? Why am I angry? Why am I shouting? Then look out for others. The third thing is to listen. So listen to your own body and your own mind. Are my thoughts towards myself negative? Am I talking negatively towards myself? Am I acting negatively towards myself? And then listen to others in a kind, compassionate, and non-judgmental manner. Let's listen to hear what the other person is saying. And the fourth thing, the 4th L, will be when we find that there's something not quite right, let's link people up with sources of support. And when you're talking to individuals and you're saying, don't say there's something wrong with you. There's something not quite right. There's something going on. Would you like that I come to your session with you? Would you like to speak to someone? So again, learn, look out, listen, and link people up with sources of support.
Learn, look out, listen and link people. So 4 L's. I know L's are usually, they mean something else on social media, but these are the L's that will make you win, not a loss in this case. And speaking of social media, our generation is big on digital things. Okay, we spend most of our time online, even more than we spend interfacing with people physically. And some say it's inevitable. You can't help it because it is what it is. So I'd like you to speak to is it Gen Z, netizens, and the rest, this generation, because mental health is a big deal. And some people just use it as a buzz term at work, in relationships. This is affecting my mental health. Maybe they understand, maybe they don't. But I'd like you to speak to the generation. And it's kind of two-pronged. You said something about spiritual angle to it. Maybe you'll answer eventually if scientists, if you acknowledge the spiritual. Maybe you can speak to that later on. But for this generation, why is it that this generation is battling with so much mental health issues? I think the one that ranks highest is depression. Correct me if I'm wrong. So what is it about this generation? And is it inevitable? Is it something that we can begin to get a hold on?
All right, I think it's interesting because, if you did an average poll of how many social media platforms that people are, you'd see 3, 4, 5. In fact, some you'd hear between 8 and 10. However, regardless of those high numbers, what researchers found is that no generation of people have been as lonely as we are. So we're lost online, but in reality, we're not connecting. And so you find people who go to dinner, dinner dates, lunch, they're saying they're watching a movie and half the time we're tweeting away or we're on Instagram or on Snapchat trying to, again, it's learned behavior, it's convenient, it's easy to, talk to people that you don't know, who don't know you, and not worry about, what's happening in real time. And so we found ourselves locked in that world. In the UK, there's a minister for loneliness. We're so lonely. Despite the fact that we have so many ways to connect, never has there been a time that people are so lonely. And so why are there many mental health issues? Social media definitely is contributing. The culture of comparison. Again, we would always say that, the culture of comparison will come with even things like our generators. I better pass my neighbor.
Yeah.
The culture on social media, these days everyone has unanimously agreed that the motto for this year is no grief for anybody.
Oh, you caught that.
There's pressure. There's pressure. There's pressure to be aware. There's pressure to be alive. There's pressure to be part of, what's going on. And so the number one, and of course you were almost right when you said depression, is anxiety. Anxiety is the commonest mental health disorder.
Anxiety ranks
yes,
higher
anxiety
depression.
is higher. Depression comes. Then of course you have substance use disorders. People are turning to substances of abuse, alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, to run away from pain and to run towards pleasure.
So that's also a mental health issue.
Oh, it is, definitely.
So it's not a recreation, it's not a way to...
Well, it may start off as that. However, the effects.
Okay.
The after effect.
I wanted, just a minute.
Yeah.
I did an interview some years ago, and I had clinical psychologists, psychiatrists, the expertise within your space. And they said something that struck me and it has never left me. They talked about what they call stress threshold. So I want you to relate stress threshold with occupational hazard. So for instance, in my layman's understanding, my stress threshold, his own, may be different. Let me give numbers. If mine may be 200, hers is 500, his is 700.
Oh, wow.
So what can knock me off in 200 will look like, Kayode has not even moved anywhere. Yeah. And if Kayode is not careful, he say, Jeff, why are you so lazy? Just this small thing, you're already shaking. So I'm just making it as lay as possible. So you explain stress threshold and occupational hazard in terms of coping with mental health in the workplace.
Okay, I think that one negative thing that we've pushed over time is that stress is negative. Stress is a normal response. And so, for instance, when I wake up in the morning on a Monday morning and I'm thinking, wow, I have to get to the island from the mainland, the first thing that hits me is there'll be traffic. That's a stressor. And our stressors can be external or internal. So sometimes our stressors we can be our own stressors, our unrealistic and even sometimes realistic expectations of ourselves. And so whenever there's a stressor, the body gives what is known as a stress response. And in responding to the stress, what happens? It releases stress hormones. And so when stress hormones are released, there's a stressor, the stress hormones go up, you resolve the stress, it goes down. When something shows up again, it's a way of, the body looks at, wow, there's something coming to attack you. Let me see how I can protect you. And so when the stressor is gone, your hormonal levels drop. However, many of us in a city like Lagos, and with all the things happening in Nigeria and world over, are in a constant state of stress.
Thank you.
And so what happens is that
instead of thank you for
you're very welcome. And so instead of
life is hard,
waxing and waning, what you find is that the stress hormones are constantly in the system. And when stress hormones are constantly released, of course, the organs are exhausted. The body is also receiving all those stress hormones that it should have been taking in pulses. It's taking it in huge doses. And so it affects everything from the hair on your head to the sole of your feet. Again, different occupations come with their own stresses. And so what you said is right. How we react to stress is also dependent on our genetics, nature and nurture. Where do I come from? What did they tell me about stress? How did they make stress look? Did they always say that, when stress comes, don't show up, ensure you protect yourself, no, stress is not for you, you're here for the baby girl soft life, and all of that. How was stress explained to you? What has your environment told you about stress? And it's the reason why you say, for instance, if his own level is 700, and you hear that, maybe you grew up in AJ City, you're like, that's why.
AJ for life.
And if you grew up in a softer part of Lagos, you think that. So again,
I grew up in the rough area.
It is learned. Stress behaviors are also learned. They're things that we've depended depended on over time.
Okay.
And so whatever it is that we see at our workplaces, again, being aware, being informed. I mean, when I used to work, part of what I would think is I could get attacked. It didn't happen a lot of times, but did it happen? I was aware that it could happen. And so I wasn't just sitting and thinking nothing will happen. Let's be aware that all industries come with their own stresses. If you go to the financial industry now, they're talking about targets, they're talking about fluctuations in dollar rate. Be aware, be informed.
So just not trying to, does this mean that certain people should not go to certain spaces given their stress?
So one good thing that we do and we encourage is that you have psychological assessments before people take on jobs. Okay,
HR has to take notes of all of that.
You didn't talk about the spiritual
yeah, so,
do you recognize that as well?
So definitely, even as scientists, I mean, we're humans, and we talk about the pillars of wellness. One of the pillars of wellness is the spiritual pillar of wellness.
No, I mean, do you acknowledge that some of these mental health issues can be spiritual?
Well, so I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. When you say spiritual, you're saying it's caused by spiritual and it cannot be resolved.
Maybe an arrow was.
Maybe an arrow.
Thank you.
That's the right word. In high places.
The dots.
No.
So science doesn't acknowledge that?
No. There are cases, we will tell you that there are cases we may not have solutions to. But then again, science will explain it. So for instance, we talk about the rule of thirds in my line of work. Some people will get better, some people's symptoms will resolve, and some people, no matter what you do, they will still not get better. However, we would not say that it is because somebody has sealed something somewhere. We've seen it work. We've tested it, we've tried it, we've seen it work. However, like I've said, we agree that spiritual wholeness is also very important, and wherever people will find strength for their journeys, they can draw strength and energy from there as well.
But do you acknowledge that some have been miraculously healed, maybe by the hand of God in the course of their experience?
So again, what you believe will work for you. You know, a few days ago, somebody wrote a post and said the doctors did not agree that it was a miracle. I'm Christian, I pray. And so sometimes there's some things you can't explain. And so whether it was, like the person wrote, because of us or in spite of us, the goal for every physician is to ensure, to pray and to hope that you see this person that was broken, that wasn't whole when they came, that they, eventually they're as whole as they can be.
Well, that was not my main concern anyway. I'm interested in the social media part of it.
We don't have the luxury of time.
Can we keep her like every day?
Can we just make her irregular?
I know, right? Oh dear.
Well, we want to thank you so much, Dr. Bojibola Abiri, consultant psychiatrist, managerial psychologist, CEO, Ready-Made Consulting Services. Thank you so much for your insight. We have a lot of questions. In fact, we should give you about an hour. And if it was radio and I open the phone lines, you will hear things. But we want to thank you for coming. Thank you. We appreciate it. Thank you
very much for having me.
Well, we'll go to break now. When we return, I know there's lots of questions. We'll probably have her back in the coming days. But we'll go to break. When we return, we have something more for you. We have our reporters out there on the streets checking the prices to ensure that, first, what the NNPCL said is what it is, and, of course, the commodities you'll be buying today. But not forgetting the Africa Cup of Nations. What is going on? Where are we going to watch the matches? Yes, Ndidi is out. The team list. There's so much to talk about our favorite sport, football. So that's in a moment. Stay with us.